Space. I'm Kim Kral. I'm reporting you not live from my closet. Hi, guys. My cat's in the closet right now. He's found a new spot that he likes to sleep during the day. And it's only like a 4-day-old new sleeping spot, but so this is the first time I've recorded with him in here. And he seems fine so far. I've been in here talking to myself for a good 15 minutes. So he seems fine so far, hopefully. Oh man, guys. Hi. How are we? I feel like the last 3 weeks have been so freaked out about my book, that I've disassociated and I don't remember most of the podcasts that I'm like, I have no idea what I talked about. Mostly the book. But today I think I know it's going to be a bit of a serious one. And every time I know I'm going to come into the closet and talk about serious shit, I get like super nervous and I avoid it like I owe it money. Like, it's something happened this morning in the news. And I think it's important to talk about. And I always get nervous that when I talk about important shit, people are either not going to take me seriously or get bored and tune me out. But I guess those people that do that, I'm not for you, you know? Also, there's a podcast I was on Bill Dawes' podcast. Bill Dawes' podcast? His name's Bill Dawes. So is it Bill Dawes'? Bill Dawes? I don't know. He probably knows. I could ask him. That'd be a weird thing for me to call him and be like, yo, I can't say your name with the plural. Or possession, right? Is that what it is? Possession? Don't know much about history. I was on his podcast and it's like a 3-hour conversation. And it releases tomorrow. It was like 3 hours and he messaged me today and he goes, I'm not going to cut it up. It's a really good conversation. And he's like, I think it's important shit that we talked about. And I think that if people want to listen to the 3 hours, they will listen. And I think you should. I've never sat down. He says I sound really good and he doesn't sound very good, which is, I'm like, yeah, because we disagree and I'm on the right side of things. I don't think he's on the wrong side of things. I think he's in the middle side of things. And I think it's, but he also was very civil. That's the wrong word I'm looking for. But I have not in a long time had a civil conversation or like a productive conversation with someone I don't agree with. And he and I talked for a really long time about shit. We just see different eye to eye. And he's not on the like all lives matter side, but he's like, he's questioning statistics, which isn't fully correct, but we talk a lot about it. And then we also talk about how I was sexually abused and, how my family reacted to it and how I handled it and where I'm at today. And, I know I talk about it some on here and I talk about it one-on-one with people, but I have never talked about it as much and as openly as I did. He's a really good interviewer, by the way, as I did on his show. And I thought, today with what's going on in the news, which I'll get to, I'm going to have a little bit of a serious day, a little bit of a serious talk, because what I want to do with my life is give victims space to talk and be believed and not brushed off, or it wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Like, so Bill Cosby was released today. They overturned his conviction. I'm not seeing a bunch of information so far. It's just saying that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned the conviction. I believe that it was because they allowed in a testimony that they now see as unconstitutional. He's only served 2 years of his 10-year sentence. 10 years is all you get for drugging and raping a person. Isn't that fucking crazy? That's fucking crazy. I'm so angry and I'm not triggered. I know a lot of people, because of what I went through as a child, a lot of people think I get triggered when I talk about this stuff. Like I talked about the bouncer that cornered me in a closet and asked to see under my dress, and then wouldn't let me leave. I had to push him out. And then how my former employer handled that, how poorly they handled it. And how a lot of the people at that bar turned on me, how they all took the guy's side and I shouldn't have rocked the boat. It wasn't that bad. So why did you need to say something? And then one of the bouncers who I had become friends with and knew a lot about my dad, he goes, yeah, when I found out that he had done that, Boris had done this to one of the bartenders, I thought, please don't let it be Kim. And yeah, I used his name because I don't give a fuck. Don't corner a woman in a closet and ask to see under her dress if you don't want to be fucking called out. But the bouncer I was close to, he knew a lot about, and he was like, oh man, when I heard that, I was like, please don't let it be Kim, because of everything she's gone through, I'm sure she's going to take it much worse than a normal person. And it's just like, and then when I get heated about Bill Cosby, or I get heated about these subjects, people are like, I know it's triggering for you. It's not fucking triggering for me. I've worked through this. Like, I forgave my father. I actually went back and forgave him in person before he died. I have gone to therapy. I've gone to 12-step. I've worked 12-step program through it. I've talked about it. And yeah, part of it will always be with me. In my most formative years, the man that was supposed to be taking care of me, like I get sad, not sad. It's I get uncomfortable when a father and a daughter are affectionate on TV, because that to me is danger, Will Robinson. I don't know why I said that, but you know what like, that's what I see it as, even though I know that's just my child brain, the child part of my brain that had a father that would be affectionate, but it wasn't a father-daughter affection. It was, strings attached, more stuff involved, and so it irks me. It doesn't irk me. It pisses me off when people are like, well, I know you're a little more sensitive to it. Why? Because I was sexually abused as a child? No, maybe I've done more research, more work on it, more looked into it, talked to more victims. Like, it happened to like sexual assault and sexual abuse has happened to way more people than you know, right? Men alike as well. Like I know a man that was assaulted by a woman, and he was brave enough, and I'm keeping names out of this, and I'm going to keep it super vague because it's not mine to tell, but he was brave enough to say something about it, and say something on social media, and tell his story. And then multiple men came forward about this same woman. And what's wild is some people are like, yeah, but you're a guy, you could have fought her off. Yeah, but he's a dude. Why? Like, sexual assault isn't genderized, like, at all. Like, in fact, until we can make men more comfortable talking about this sort of thing, what happens to them too. Yes, of course, on statistically speaking, it happens way more to women than it does men. But like, what about the men victims? And we have a mutual friend, the guy who was assaulted, and our mutual friend, he was like, I can't even get into all that. Like, the fact that he went out there and he wasn't assaulted because he's a big dude, and he could have said no. And it's just like, God, it's not triggering to me. And I know a lot of people are like, well, you're triggered because what happened with your dad. That makes my blood boil, because it one invalidates what is happening to other people. It invalidates situations, and it invalidates my experience of how angry I am that it happens. Invalidates, devaluates, invalid. I think invalidates is a word. You guys know sometimes I don't know words. But it invalidates others' experiences, and it invalidates all the work I've done. Takes away the validation. Invalidates. I feel like if I'm going to use that word a lot in this podcast, I should look it up to see if it's real. But it takes away invalid. All right, let's Google it together, shall we? But the fact, like, I'm not triggered. All right, validate. I can't invalidate. Yeah, it's invalidate. Oh my God. When I find out that a word that I'm using is the correct way, I'm like, God, I'm a goddamn genius. But it invalidates these people's what happened to them, the trauma. Like, it makes me so angry. And so 10 years for assaulting a woman. I mean, look at Brock Turner. Brock Turner got like 3 months in jail or some shit. He's out. I know his life's pretty much ruined, but when you have money, like, dude, I don't know where he is now, but it's like, it'd be easy for him to change his name, move to another country. He's probably fine. But the woman that he raped behind a dumpster for the rest of her life, I am grateful that we have a system that keeps those women, their identities private, because, and I uphold that when I talk about stories I've heard. And I try to vague it up too. Yeah, so just the like, I know it triggers you. So I did talk about in Bill Dawes's podcast. I don't even know how it came up, but we talked about how oh wow, this is really hard. This is the moment where I want to like turn around and like start over and do something fun. How when I cut my dad out, so when and I'm not going to get into all the fun things we did when I was a kid because I don't want to trigger people. I should probably put a trigger warning on this. I know the difference between triggers and upset because I know when I'm triggered by something, I know it like I know it's more hysterical than it. This upsets me, and I want to do everything I can to talk about this. There's a woman in comedy now who has decided to quit comedy and just dedicate all of her social media to taking down the predators in comedy. And some of them I know personally, the guys that she's calling out, I know personally who've been very kind to me. But I also know that that's how people felt about Chris D'Elia, where they're like that guy, and we talk about living in the gray. I talked about that with a friend today, where what D'Elia did, a lot of people were like, well, that's kind of gray because they were underage. They were like 17. That's a child. There's a comic I know when the D'Elia stuff was coming out. For those of you who don't know, Chris D'Elia was outed as a comic and was outed over the summer for luring underage girls to his hotel room or various places and having sex with them. That's statutory rape, by the way. And then some people's arguments like, well, in that state, 16 is the age of consent. Are you kidding me? That's your argument. The guy I ended things with a month or two ago is D'Elia's like a huge fan of Chris D'Elia. And I can't and like justifies what happened because they said yes and they were they're almost 18 and it's just like those are so like that to me. I'll never be able to be with a man who says that about a predator. And D'Elia he apologized to his fiance for cheating on her and then made it all about himself. There was never a moment where he apologized to the victims. And I know a lot of women that have come forward personally. I know a few women personally who have talked about the things Chris D'Elia did to them. And I won't share those, but like it's just like so that guy gets to say he has a sex problem and now he gets to come back. And then people like the dude I was seeing is like, well, he said he was sorry and he has a problem. And I think that that's fine. And we should not cancel everybody. Like I'm grateful that it ended with that guy. It still sort of stings a little bit, but I think that's just, how it goes. This is going to be all over the map. I apologize, I guess. But yeah, she's naming out all these names and it's hard for me because a few of those guys I know and they have been kind to me. But I also know that the other guys she's naming get to just like own this industry and act however they fucking want to act and talk to women however they want to talk to women and do what Louis C.K. did for a long time. And there's people who still justify what Louis C.K. did to them. There's still people that are like, but he asked. And it's like, if you are a person that says he asked before he dropped his pants in a room, in a green room in a comedy club when he was one of the biggest comics in the world, and masturbated in front of these women. I know women that he ruined their lives. The PTSD from that, the like anxiety around it, and then the victim blaming and shaming they had, they quit comedy. I know a woman who was actually interviewed in the New York Times for the whole thing, and she was like, yeah, I quit comedy because I was so fucking scared. It's like what we did to Monica Lewinsky. Oh God, it's just so it's the patriarchy, and I hate. I know that that's like a feminism drum beat or whatever, like where they're like, it's a fuck the patriarchy, but it really is. It's like, well, it's like, what about the victims? What about the woman that was brave enough to stand up to Bill Cosby in court, have her story told, have her name all over the place? The hate mail that woman must have gotten, like the scrutiny that one, and she did it all. And then at the end of it, he got convicted and was put away. And it was like, okay, it was all for something. When this guy gets out, he won't be too young or too old to do anything, right? He'll be almost dead. And then now they overturned it and this guy is walking out free. and it's not hard for me. Like I just, it makes me so angry that people hear my story and they go, well, I know it's harder for you because of what happened to you. No. In fact, I think I understand it more because of what happened to me, but it's not harder for me. You should have empathy for those victims. You shouldn't have had to be sexually assaulted or abused in order to look at that and have humanity for those victims and understand like what we did to Monica Lewinsky. She consented to blowing a dude, but the most powerful man on the planet, you're 23 years old, asks you for a blowjob, you say yes to that. Like, I don't like that's not, and we made her a punchline. And she has done well for herself, actually. Now she laughs along and her Twitter is fantastic. But like how we and then we praise Bill Clinton, who used his power to get a blow, like to get it's like what we did with Britney Spears. And now everyone's all on Team Britney now because she was able to finally stand up for herself. What we've been doing to Britney Spears the whole time should be infuriating to you. This little girl got out of a car with no underwear on under her skirt, and a male adult paparazzi went up over under her skirt and took a picture of her vagina. And the world made a Britney Spears apologize for that. It's just all so fucking backwards. It's just also back. So when I talk about on the podcast tomorrow, and please listen to the whole thing because I'm going to talk about it now. I waited until, and I knew that I didn't know exactly when something like that happens to you as a child. At a young age, you repress a lot of those memories. A lot of my memories are still gone. Like I don't remember huge chunks of my childhood. There are times where I have a memory right up until my dad was going to touch me, and it goes black, literally goes black. Like I have no after, no, like it's black, right? And so your brain, from my understanding, will help you survive trauma like that by hiding it from you, by removing it. Because, and I know when I had the first memory of my dad touching me in the shower, I broke my arm that day. And maybe one day there'll be another episode where I'll really talk about the abuse. But I keep it vague because, well, it's graphic and gross and horrible. And so I repress a lot of that. And then my mom left when I was young. She didn't, I got every other weekend or whatever, but my mom wasn't around. She was gone. And I was told quite a bit by all the adults in my life that my dad was the best guy ever. And like, thank God he wanted me because no one else did. And like, look at him, he stayed. It took me years of therapy and 12-step to be like, yeah, you had a kid. You knocked one drug addict, knocked up another drug addict, and then you had a kid. And like, you had to like you kept it clothed and fed. I wonder what like I'm fresh out of medals today. Like but I was raised to believe that because he stayed and he was the leader of the Girl Scout troop, which is a lot to unpack. I don't believe he did anything to the other girls because they still reach out to me about how great he was. But I think he did it because of guilt, right? Like it was just like, oh, if I'm the best dad ever on paper or to the outside world, what I'm actually doing inside this house will be less shitty, or less like, I don't know. And I've forgiven Tom because my dad was mentally ill. Like he was mentally ill. He was sick. And yeah, it sounds wild. I know. And it still should. So I was raised in this environment that was told that he was the best guy ever, right? Everybody around me just loved my dad so much. My dad was super charismatic. And according to a lot of people, he was really funny. I never really saw the funny side of him. He didn't really treat me the way he treated other people. Besides the whole sexual abuse thing, I just mean like in general, like there was never really any like fun times, like we had some good memories. Obviously there were good memories. It's not black and white. I think that's where living in the gray is that Tom was really sick. And I know I've called him a monster before, but I and talk to me next year. Maybe more stuff will be revealed. I think it's not a linear process. And if you are somebody that has gone through this, I'm so sorry. And I'm sorry how hard it is for us to come forward. Like after days like today with Cosby, it's just like, ask me again why victims don't come forward. Like you are dragged through the fucking mud. Every little part of your life is on trial. Every sexual partner, every drug you've done, every single way that the fucking defense attorney can tear you apart to prove innocence is put out for the world to see. And then maybe they'll get convicted. And if they get convicted, maybe they'll get a year for something that will take the rest of your life to get over. And then maybe they'll get the conviction overturned and walk out scot-free, where a lot of people are like, I knew he never did anything. Like, it's just, ask me again why victims don't come forward. Ask me fucking again. A lot of people are like, well, if this happened to you when you were a kid, why didn't you say anything then? Because I was told my dad was the best guy ever. And everybody else that loved him, everybody else that loved me said he was the best dude ever. And then the only other option was living with my mother, who was a drug addict and an alcoholic and was going in and out of jails and rehabs and a revolving door of men. It was not safe. And like what my brain did, what any other brain does, is it shut it down and like disassociated and got through it. And then when I grew up, everyone was like, your dad is the best guy ever. Your dad is the best guy ever. And I was a broken record who said that. I was like, my dad is the best guy in the world. My dad is my best friend. I love my dad. My dad, my dad, my dad. But meanwhile, my skin was crawling. He made my skin crawl. We'd go on these trips when I was in high school. And I know we went when I was younger, when I was in high school, and we'd stay in the same hotel room, and he would just wake me up while he was like naked, touching himself in the bed next to his. And I maybe I ought to put a trigger warning on this. I think the episode's going to be named Me Too Part 2. So if most people will know what it's going to be about, but and so I made a hat, and I never could sleep, right? Because he'd be laying in the bed next to me naked and doing God knows what. I still haven't, those nights are pretty blurry in my memory, but I started, and I haven't told many people this, when we would go on these trips, and my family would be like, oh my God, you and your dad, you go on these wonderful daughter-dad trips, and you guys are so close, and it's so awesome. And meanwhile, on these trips, we went to Disney World. And I was like, I can't sleep, Dad. So you snore. I made up that, instead of being like, you wake me up naked, touching yourself. You moan all night. Like, God knows what you're fucking doing in the bed next to me. And so I would sleep on the patio of whatever hotel. If there wasn't a patio, I'd sleep in the bathtub with the door locked, and just like, and no one knew that. Like, he was like, that's normal. Like, what the fuck? And so I knew he made my skin crawl. And I remember I told my roommate in college, after I had known, after I started sort of admitting that something had happened. At the very least, we showered together until I was like 12, right? And the shower time was super blurry, but later, the day I broke my arm, I had memories of the actual molestation in there. This is a little bit less of a fun crawl space. I know that it's important, though. At least it's important to me. It's important to me because I had to block it out and not talk to anybody for years and years. And I had multiple boyfriends and dating stuff. I wrote a whole book about how fucked up I was. And it was because I couldn't talk about this stuff. So it was easier for me to just date like trash bags, because I didn't believe I deserved any better, because this is what my father did. And so I told years later, when I kind of started realizing, at least admitting, that I'd showered with him for as long as I had. And that sounds like I'm blaming 12-year-old me. My father, that he made me shower with him as long as he did. my grandmother was still alive, and my grandmother was one of my favorite people on the planet. In fact, if you got my book, she's half of the dedication, my grandma and papa. And so I waited till she died before I cut him out, because I knew that that would destroy her, because she was one of those that thought my dad was like the second coming. But I started to admit that out loud to people, not to people, really to myself, that something had happened. And the first time I said it out loud, I was at an Al-Anon meeting. God, it was like 15 years ago. And it was in a house, and it was an all women's meeting. And I was sitting, and it was, it was like someone's house. So it was like a really intimate setting. And we're all sitting in, we're all in this living room. There's like 25 women in there, and every woman has shared, right? And I am the last person to have shared. And if you've ever been to a 12-step where everyone in the room shares and you don't, and there's enough time for you to share, that'll get you to share, dude. That'll get you to fucking share. Cause like the silence of just everyone, everyone's trying not to stare at you because they understand they've been there before, where they don't want to share either, but they also know everyone knows it's you're up, right? And so I raised my hand, and I just said, I showered with my dad until I was 12. And then I just sat there and sobbed the rest of my 2.5 minutes of sharing. And I never went back to that meeting. And I mean, and it's obvious why that was a big deal. That was really scary. And I just didn't think I could face any of those women. And I think that's why it's so important for me to talk about it now and be so open about what happened to me, because I want to take the stigma out of it. Like, then my shame was so big. I was ashamed that I had done something. It wasn't my shame. It was Tom's shame. And so many victims have that shame. And I think if I can just talk about it enough, and enough people can feel like they're not alone, then I career well spent, whew. This is where I get nervous about YouTube. It takes me 6 years to post these anyway. I finally posted like 2 episodes, but and then I went home shortly after that, and I drove to Denver. And I lied. Did I drive to Denver? Yeah, I did drive, and I lied and said that I was only going to be there for like 4 days, but really I was going to be there like 7, and so I didn't have to see my dad that long. And this is disgusting. I went up, my dad was living in this 1-bedroom apartment. He had lost our house right after I moved to LA. And he was living in this little apartment that was a huge deal that I never stayed with him in. Like, it was like when he died, I got the letters I sent to him, and it's so sad because I was just such a scared 22-year-old saying, I don't want to stay in your 1-bedroom apartment with you, Dad. And you would think that little did he know, in like 3 years I was going to cut his ass out. But the way he responded to that was like I was abandoning him. And who knows, we could dive into his psychology, but he was a sick man. And he saved all those letters, which is wild. They were all like an envelope in his like top desk drawer. Like, he like would frequently read it like a heartbroken teenager. So fucking dramatic. And I went to his apartment to say goodbye the day that I was supposedly going to drive back to LA. And we talked for a little bit. And then he said, I can't believe I'm sharing this on here, but I'm tired of not being fully open about this, because I want to spare my family who loves him so much. But it's like, I don't even think they listen to this. And also, the ones that believe me, and the ones that don't never want to talk about it ever. Or they believe me, but they don't want to believe, you know what I mean? So it's just like, I'm tired of not telling. So we're sitting in the living room. I think 3 people know this story. We're sitting in, one of them's like a therapist. We're sitting in his living room, and I'm about to go. And he says, please stay the night. Stay the night with me one more time. I promise I'll be a good little boy. My fucking dad said that to me. And at that point, I had enough Al-Anon and therapy in me to know that my dad was just a sick man. That's a sick man. And I just said, you got to let me go, Dad. And he said, I know. And then I left. Then I went over to my old roommate's house. Oh, I can't believe I just shared that. Oh, and it's still like, I know that it's not my shame. I know that. But like, it's still ingrained in me that it is, that I'm so ashamed that I had a dad that said that to me. When he finally admitted it to my friend who came back with me to say goodbye to him when he died, and he said lines were crossed. That conversation reminds me of when he said, stay the night one more time. One more time. What the fuck was he talking about? Like, he acted like we were like forbidden, like lovers or coworkers. I was a little girl, man. I was a little girl, but it took me years to see that. I always I had dreams about us, and I would dream as an adult. Like, I was an adult and he was doing these things to me, and I'd wake up so ashamed and so horrified. And like, I had done something. And it took actually my current sponsor in ACA to be like, you're a child. You were a child. There's literally nothing that you could have done. You were a child. And I let that all go. And the dreams, by the way, stopped because this woman, this wonderful woman, said that to me. And I think if I can just say that to anybody to help them get through it, and fuck, man. So I went to my roommate's house, my old roommate's house, to visit her, and she knew my dad. She was my roommate in college. And I sat her down, and I told her, this is what I think my dad did, but I don't know if there's more. But this is what I remember, and these are the things that I never wanted to admit. And she said, you know what? I knew that. And I said, how did you know that? She said, well, first of all, you talked about your dad like he was the second coming. But when I would come visit you at your dad's house, it was like mission impossible to get from the front door to your bedroom without your dad talking or seeing us. That's not normal. Neither of those things are normal. To put him on such like a weird, almost obsessive pedestal, and then also avoiding him like the goddamn plague. People don't do that with healthy parents, like that's not. And then she said, and then when I met your dad, my dad took my roommates out to dinner once in college, and the two boys I lived with, just like ate him up. My dad was very charismatic and was the guy that would like give the kid a beer. So like the teenage boy was like, your dad's the coolest. And it's just like, yeah, meanwhile, my dad yells at me if he can't watch me change, God. And I'll get back to the gray with that too. A lot of people think, because he didn't rape me every day, it wasn't that bad. And there were times where I kind of wish that it was even worse, so that maybe I could have gotten help or talked about it more quicker. You know what I mean? Because people, as a whole, when it's black and white, it's way easier to come forward. But when it's that weird gray where, but mine wasn't gray. It took me years to have memories of it and years to talk about it. It wasn't fucking gray. And she said that when we went to dinner, my roommate, she goes, when we went to dinner, our boy roommates ate him up and loved every minute of it. But she goes, your dad made my skin crawl. The way he looked at me, the way he looked at you, the way he talked and touched, just touched anything. Like, she goes, he made my skin crawl. And that was a milestone in being in healing too. Just being validated and listened to, being told that it was that bad. And I'm telling you this stuff, if you have a victim in your life and they come forward to you, like, don't validate it. Don't justify it. Validate their experience. Like my cousin, when I told her that Tom had done this stuff to me, she immediately said, I believe you. I believe you. And another cousin, when I finally told her, she said, I'm crying just because I'm crying because it's I'm grateful that this was the response, and I'm happy, and it's hard to share, and this is going to be a rough episode to put out there, but I think it's important. My other cousin said, she hugged me and said, I am so sorry. You thought you had to carry that alone. And I did. I thought I did. And so after the good little boy comment, my grandma died a few years later, and I had one last thing tying my dad to me. He was paying my car payment, and I was trying to figure out how I could cut him off, and I was terrified. I wasn't making very much money, and I was terrified I wasn't going to be able to afford this car payment, right? And in 12-step programs, we have traditions, and how we kind of run our 12-step meetings and the whole program as a whole. They're like one of the good ones is principles before personalities. So like the greater good is more important than individual arguments, right? Like I dislike a lot of people in my 12-step programs, but I have, but doesn't matter. What matters is the thing as a whole, that we all get to be there and recover regardless, right? And then number 7 is that being fully self-supporting, not taking outside contributions. And I heard that for the first time when I was trying to figure out how to cut my dad out, but also get him to keep paying my car payment, because I was like, I can't afford it. And I'd listened to those traditions 7 billion times over, and I had a sponsor at the time who said, well, tradition 7, that we are fully self-supporting, and like, you'll be taken care of. This $200 will come. Like, you'll be able to pay that bill. And so my grandma had been dead for, like 9 months or something like that. I don't remember exact time, but less than a year. And I reached out to my dad and I was like, hey, I can pay my own car payment now. You don't have to pay the payment anymore. And he was like, really? Are you sure? Because my dad also used money as a way to like control me, right? That was a big get me to do what he wanted me to do, or like just money was a big. That's why I'm now currently working on my money stuff, because I'm really weird about money, and I know it has something to do with that fucking dude. And just like, how many issues could this guy have given? I mean, the little story I told you now, it's no wonder I don't have a needle in my arm. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so grateful that I don't. That when I was doing a lot of serial killer research, and I've talked about this before, a lot of those guys had the same childhood that I did, and like, thank God I had grandparents. If you read my book, my dedication was to those two people. Like, when people were like, how are you not like way more fucked up? And it, like, everything good in me came from those two people. My grandparents. My papa was my favorite person, still my favorite person I've ever met. And my grandma, close second. She was a mean, angry Irish woman. Fuck, I loved her. Who's just so bossy to everybody. But and I knew it'd kill her. If it already killed her that I didn't see my dad enough. And I barely went home when she was alive just to see her and then tolerate him. I have letters from her being like, you could be nicer to your dad. God, how crazy is that? But I told him I was going to pay my own car payment. And I wait, and then he started, and he was like, okay, that's good, whatever. And little did he know that was me preparing to cut him out of my life. And then the next couple of months I spent figuring out how the fuck I was going to do it. Hardest decision I've ever made in my life. And the second hardest is going back and saying goodbye to him before he died and forgiving him. I'm grateful that I did both. I think that certainly if I had kept him in my life and didn't cut him out, I would be dead. There's no doubt in my mind I would be dead. I don't know if it would be something that I would have done, or something that like drugs or alcohol or just reckless living. I don't know, but I would be, there's no doubt in my mind I would be dead if I didn't have cut him out. So I spent a couple of months trying to figure out how to do that. And the more I pulled away, the more he called and called and called. I mean, just like an obsessive ex-boyfriend, just over and over, 6 a.m., 2 a.m., call me back, threats, crying, anger, all this insanity. And I wrote him a letter. And it took me a long time too, after he died, to forgive myself for that letter, because I should have been braver or stronger to have done it to his face. And a sponsor of mine, not my current one, my last one, she was like, would you make another woman face her chronic abuser face to face to cut him out of their life? Or would you be like, no, you're allowed to do whatever you can do, however you were able to? And it's like, yeah, Kim now would have maybe done it differently, but Kim 10 years ago just needed that man out of my fucking life, and I didn't know how to do it. And I remember that day that I sent that letter, I hand wrote it. And my dad always, when I went into therapy and I went into 12-step, he was always terrified that the reason why I was in those things was because of him. And he would play, like, you're not going to Al-Anon because of anything I did, right? Like, ugh. Yes, but I didn't want to upset him, and I didn't know it was because of him. And I had such a drunky mom that it was easy to be like, no, it's her. And so in this letter, I said, I need you to. That letter was in there too, along with the letters of me begging him to please understand why I couldn't stay in his 1-bedroom apartment with him. God, he was a sick man, dude. And that letter just said, I need you to not contact me. I will contact you if and when I am ready. A lot has come to light. I need to work through the past with you and I need you to not be there while I do it. And I said, if you want to know, this was the most I could say. If you are going to ask if the reason I'm doing this and going to therapy is because of you, yes, it is because of things you did. Yes. Don't contact me. I will if and when I am ready. And I sent it. And I sat outside the post office and I sobbed. I went to an Al-Anon meeting, sat in the Al-Anon meeting, and this woman who I no longer in touch with, but will forever have a sacred space in my heart, sat there while I just sobbed. I just sobbed. And then I sobbed outside of the fucking post office. And little did I know how hard it was going to be, but how much it saved my life. God, this is a bummer of an episode. I keep thinking that, but I think it's important. And I'll give you a trigger warning on my posts about it. And don't worry, the next book, I actually have already started writing the next book. Don't you worry. It's going to be about this. It's going to be about my dad and I's relationship. It's called Tom Made Me. And some of it's going to be, the lighter side of our relationship. Like Tom made me cool. Tom made me this, but there's going to be a lot of this in there too. And so I went home and I didn't think about my family. I didn't cross my mind at all. I was close to a lot of them. And my cousin I'm very close to called me, I'm going to say like 5 days probably after he got the letter, or 5 days after I sent it. So I assume there was some phone calls. Who knows what? I still don't know. And maybe I'll ask her one day exactly how it was presented. But she called and she was drunk, and which is understandable because and she alluded to knowing why I had and kind of always knew and just didn't it was just, and one of the regrets I had and one of the, and amends that I am making to some of the family, like my little cousin that I'm really close to, that I just clapped out. I didn't call anybody and say, hey, I'm going to do this, hey, I'm still here. I'm still your family. I love you. It was just, I had to get the fuck away and I didn't know any other way to do it. And some family chose sides. My uncle Jerry, he never did, but he needed to know why. And he would, we'd go, when I'd come into town, we'd always have lunch, and he's passed on and he's one of my favorite people. And we'd have lunches and he just needed to know why. And I wasn't able to tell him. I'd tell him now. I tell any of them now. It's not mine. It's his. It's Tom's. Tom did this. I didn't do this. I was a little fucking kid. It's taken me, 20 years to finally get to the point where I can talk about it. So once again, ask me again why victims don't come forward. It's not just you come forward, the guy goes to jail. It's like, it's coming forward also equals people justify it or don't believe you, or you spend the rest of your life trying to heal from the aftermath of ruining someone's life. Oh God. And all those relationships, my cousin Maggie never chose sides. I officiated her wedding the first time I saw my dad after all of that. My dad would leave messages or emails every now and then and say that he was on his way to California and that he was going to force me to go to dinner with him and we were going to talk about this. I didn't realize how traumatizing that was and how much my anxiety was real until after he died and Jimmy the Dragon and I broke up, and he started leaving messages that he was in town and he needed to see me. And then I started getting anxiety that was like, that's triggering. By the way, if you want to know what a trigger is, that's what triggering. Like, I'm not afraid of Jimmy the Dragon at all. Like, now that I've worked through the trigger, come on over, Jimmy the Dragon. I can tell you to fuck off. But But I, for those of you who read the book, it's Danny the dragon in the book because I changed his name in the book. I don't fully understand how I can't get sued for this, but I could get sued for that. Maybe it's the writing thing. I don't know. I should call my lawyer friend back and ask. I am having lunch with him next week, I believe, so I can ask then, I suppose. But yeah, he would leave it. And then I would sit in my apartment in the corner and sob, staring at that message or the email, shaking, like visceral reactions to knowing that he was on his way. And then I would call somebody in program and say, this is what happened. And they would say, let's walk through what you're going to do. And I would email them back with my friend on the phone, my they call them fellow travelers on the phone. And it would say, I got your message. That doesn't work for me. Do not come to Los Angeles. And the funny thing is not, again, none of this is ha 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 funny, but the wild thing is he would, my dad used to send me, I think I've already told you guys about this, for my birthday, would send me sexually suggestive birthday cards. It's not funny, but it's so ludicrous that it's a little funny, right? It's not funny like ha 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 ha, but it's just like, Jesus Christ, dude. Like and I remember I had this buddy Kyle who helped me help me heal a little bit. Like laughter has always been medicine for me. I know that that's cliche and it's medicine for a lot of people, but it's always been like that for me. And my buddy Kyle, I was working, we worked in this phone room and he was sitting next to me and I pulled out this card and on the front it said sex and money. And then you open it up and it was either 2 things you're going to get from me for your birthday or 2 things you're not going to get from me from your birthday. Either one, your dad shouldn't be sending you a card that says sex on the front of it, right? And then it said love dad. And I looked at my buddy Kyle and I was like, see what I have to deal with? And he just started laughing. And I was like, that's not funny. And I had just sort of realized that the showering was something that wasn't okay. And there was a reason why we weren't allowed to talk about it. Right. So I don't know what I'm saying. Oh, so I show Kyle this and he starts laughing and he goes, come on, that is so fucked up that it's funny. It's so fucked up. It's so fucked up that it's funny. And I was like, and I was able to heal a little bit. My dad used to get me Victoria's Secret, Jesus Christ, pajamas for Christmas. They were never like lingerie, but why are you in Victoria's Secret buying your daughter anything? And I would keep them and I would feel so ashamed every time I wore them and every time I looked at them, just like the visceral reaction to seeing that, and then I made this friend Stacy who I told, and he also used to get me sex calendars. They were cartoons about sex, but so Christmas was always calendar with that and not lingerie, but sexy pajamas from Victoria's Secret. And I showed my friend Stacy this one year and I was just like, oh, it makes me so sad. And then I showed her a box of these like sex cards from my dad. And she goes, what are you doing? Throw it away. And I was like, what? It never dawned on me that I didn't have to keep this shit. She was like, just throw it away. What else did he get you? One year he got me a camera. He always got me something super expensive along with like pajamas from Victoria's Secret. She's like, keep the computer, throw away the pajamas and the sex calendar. You don't got to keep that shit. And so and I think that's why I'm so open about this now. And this is what I want to do with my life is that I want to take the stigma out of sexual abuse, not sexually abusing, but the victims. There's a stigma and it makes people uncomfortable when you're like, oh yeah, this happened to me. People are like, oh my God, it's so, yeah, I know it's uncomfortable. We should talk about it. So maybe it might stop happening all the time. It happens all the time. The number of people I know that have come to me and talked to me about this stuff because I'm so open and have told me they've never told a goddamn soul what their brother, cousin, dad, uncle did to them until I was a person that came forward and said, this is what happened to me. And I'm going to talk about it because it's not my shame. It's Tom's shame. And so I'll never stop talking about it. And so today that Bill Cosby getting released today is a massive step back. And a massive step back. So yeah, my cousin, I officiated her wedding and it's the first time I saw my dad since I cut him out, and she was so wonderful. She my family got this house near where the wedding was. Now they rented this house, and my cousin was like, "Hey," and I wasn't making very much money at the time, and I couldn't afford a hotel room. But because I was officiating, she was like, "You can stay in the house, or your dad's going to be there. So if you want, we can have your dad stay somewhere else, or we can get you a hotel room and we'll pay for it, or you can stay in the house if you're comfortable." And thank God I had enough 12 step in me, to be able to say, I won't be able to stay in that house. And she was like, "Got you a hotel, no problem." And he and my aunt and uncle spent a lot of that wedding at the trunk of their car drinking booze out of the trunk because there was no hard liquor at this wedding. But it was facing him and then facing him on a level of like standing in front of like 50 people officiating my first wedding. It was really scary. And then the last day, I had to forgive myself for this. I had felt so much shame around this. The last day, it was one of the coolest weddings I've ever been to. It rained really badly that day, and we were all under the tent. It was an outside wedding, and we were all under these tents. Oh, excuse me, I burped. Sorry. We're all under these tents. And then the bride finally kicked off her shoes and just started dancing in the rain. So then the rest of us danced in the rain. I have never been sicker in my life, except for when I had mono and COVID. I was so sick. And so that morning, I got up from the hotel room and I forgot to brush my teeth the night before and that morning. So gross, so gross. But I had stuff in my teeth and I didn't notice until I got to the airport. I was so ashamed. I'm a human. I was hungover and sick, and I was just like, whatever. So we go back to the house, and this is the last time I saw my dad before he I went back to see him before he died, which was, God, 9 years ago now, literally 9 years ago this month. And as we were leaving, I was hugging everybody. I was going to the airport, and as we were leaving, he was standing there, and I just walked up to him and gave him a really big hug. And I said, "I love you, Dad," and I left. And I had so much shame around that. And the shame wasn't because I hugged my dad. I hugged my dad a ton when he was dying. I forgive him, dude. I know that sounds wild, but my dad was a sick guy. And my spiritual belief is that, he was all pinched up while he was down here. He's higher self now. He knows what he did. And that's a lot to unpack, my whole spiritual belief, but maybe I'll do it another day, or a Patreon episode. Speaking of, I have 3 locked and loaded Patreon episodes. I just haven't gotten around to. I wrote a book, but I will this week. I promise. But it wasn't shame around hugging him, right? It was more shame that I abandoned myself because I didn't want to hug him. I just was too scared not to. So I abandoned myself to make him feel comfortable. Don't worry. I know you're listening to this and you're like, you can let that go. I let that go. But it's funny how when you go through something like that, the stuff you shame yourself for. God, I'm hoping that all the stuff in the news with the Dalias and talking about the gray and with Bill Cosby, I hope it feels like a step back, but maybe I hope that we can keep giving a voice to victims and not blaming victims and not saying things like, well, at least this didn't happen. You're right. I'm very lucky my dad didn't rape me every day. He did technically, but not with his penis. You're totally right. I'm lucky that didn't happen. Maybe we should stop doing that, and that's another thing. Like when you hear stories from people, I know the human instinct is to cut the tension with making it better, making it lighter, like being like, well, you're okay now. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's okay for us to just sit with the uncomfortable. Like if you're like, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but like every time I've told this story to people, like they feel like they need to say something. Well, at least, whether it be like, at least you're okay now, or look at you now, or you can just say that was really hard. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm here if you need to talk about what happened to you. Like that's what people need. They don't need to be told what they should be grateful for instead. Like that's a big thing that happened to me a lot too. That was like, I was told I should be grateful for X, Y, and Z instead of, this massive thing happening. Instead of saying the massive thing that happened was bad. Oh boy. So that is the episode. Thank you for giving me space to tell part of my story. Maybe another time I'll tell more of it and more of it. It's hard. I will probably sleep like a fucking baby this afternoon for getting this out, because it's emotionally tolling and taxing. But I think it's important if you're able to share your story. And it took me years of therapy and 12-step and talking with, I'm not like you should be sharing it on a big public scale, but I just mean like if you're able to, I don't know, whatever you can to heal. And my goal is to, one of my big goals in life is Tony Robbins style, standing on a stage, talking about this and talking to other victims and helping them move on. In some ways, you never will. In some ways, I will never move on to what happened in that house. And that sucks. That sucks. But I think that's just the lot I'm dealt in this life, and that's okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. Whew. Yeah, that leads me to the why I'm one lucky broad. I'm one lucky broad that I have a supportive friends and family that I, over the last, decade or so, that I've been able to talk to about this and share more and more of what happened to me, with just love and understanding and silence, just, I'm sorry that happened. I believe you. Like what my one cousin said, I'm sorry you felt you had to carry that on your own. And she just hugged me. And we've had many, many nights where we've just talked about it. And she is just fucking lovely. And she's one of those that I think I need to talk to about how I sort of abandoned, because she's my little sister on some levels. And I just left. I had no other option. I just left. So I'm one lucky broad that I had my grandparents, Dorothy and Creighton, those two people. I don't think they ever knew what was going on. I don't know. I'll never, if they did know, it died with them. But even if they did know, because of them, I am everything I am now. I have no idea who I'd be. Every good thing inside of me came from them. I'm one lucky broad. And Poop Scoop. Oh God, the poop scoop. How I don't have any. One guy emailed me and said, I have a story for you, and then didn't leave a story. So if you're that guy, you got to include the story in order to be in the poop scoop, my friend. You got to include the story. I do want to tell a palate cleansing story that I remembered the other day. So sexual abuse is out. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you got more than just, I'm sorry that happened to you, Kim. I hope maybe you saw a different perspective and maybe how to talk to other victims, or maybe look at other, like, I don't know. I hope you got more out of it than just hearing that I, had a fucked up childhood and a fucked up dad, because I think we already knew that. That's why I'm so funny, I think. So I was my cousin, my little cousin, I was his best man in his wedding. So we recovered from this. But when he was like a teenager and I was home from Colorado or from LA in Denver, he was, like the teenager who didn't really talk much, and you'd have to like pulling teeth to get him to like talk to you, because he was like just way too cool to talk. So we're driving and it's like dead silence. It's dead silent. We're driving. We're in like this neighborhood. My nose is running like a faucet. It's like dead silent. And I see a bird on the other side of the street, just like hanging out on the street. And I thought if I like swerved to like pretend to hit the bird, we'd have a laugh about it. So I swerved and I hit the bird. Like I actually like killed the bird, but it looked like I intentionally tried to kill the bird. Like I thought the bird would just fly away and we'd have a laugh about me being silly. Instead, I just went out of my way to murder a bird. And we're driving. Then I like go back to the side of my side of the street, and we're driving. And finally, my cousin goes, we're silent still. And like after several seconds, he goes, you just killed a bird. And I was like, yeah, I guess I did. And I think about that all the time. I don't know if I've ever talked to him about this before. If we have, I think he was like, yeah, I remember you killed that goddamn bird. I just killed the bird because I was trying to connect to him. I know, again, it's like when George Costanza was like running through pigeons and like he killed one or something. And he's like, we had a deal. That's what I thought. I thought that he would just move. That's a pretty good palate cleanser, right? So poop scoop, guys, I don't know. I haven't pooped my pants in a little bit. should I tell an oldie but a goodie? I remember one time when I was driving, my dad and I were on one of those creepy little road trips, and I had to poop really bad. This is grim. This is grim, but we're gonna tell it. I had to poop really bad, and I'm really afraid of outhouses. Like I'm really scared of outhouses. Maybe something happened to me in an outhouse. Like the anxiety